Good day, everybody. We're at chapter 14. I believe we left off at verse 22. 2 Samuel. And Joab fell to the ground on his face and bowed himself and thanked the king. And Joab said, Today your servant knows that I have found grace in your sight, my lord, O king, in that the king has fulfilled the request of his servant. Notes. Joab's design, quite frankly, in this matter was to make Absalom indebted to him, and thus to get both the present and future king, for Absalom was in the line for the throne into his power, or so he thought. Verse 23. So Joab arose and went to Geshur, and brought Absalom to Jerusalem. And the king said, Let him turn to his own house, and let him not see my face. So Absalom returned to his own house and saw not the king's face. Notes. Allowing him to return home still, David would have no fellowship with this man. Verse 25. But in all Israel there was none to be so much praised as Absalom for his beauty. From the sole of his foot even to the crown of his head there was no blemish in him. Notes. Once again, we have a work of the flesh which looks beautifully outwardly, but inwardly was a ravening wolf. But yet, as usual, the people would fall for this outward expression because the flesh appeals to the flesh. They thought the same thing about King Saul, and, well, that didn't turn out too good. Verse 26. And when he pulled his head, for it was at every year's end that he pulled it, because the hair was heavy on him, therefore he pulled it. He weighed the hair of his head at 200 shekels after the king's weight. Notes, this is about 6 pounds of nothing but hair, so his hair was very, very long. Verse 27. And unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of a fair countenance. Notes, now this is a different Tamar. She was named after her aunt, the girl who had been raped, and like her possessed great beauty. The Septuagint states that that she became the wife of Rehoboam, the king who succeeded Solomon, and the mother of Abijah, who succeeded Rehoboam. Verse 28. So Absalom dwelt 2 full years in Jerusalem, and saw not the king's face. Therefore Absalom sent for Joab to have sent him to the king, but he would not come to him. And when he sent again the second time, he would not come. Therefore he said unto his servants, See, Joab's field is near mine, and he has barley there. Go and set it on fire. And Absalom's servants set the field on fire. Notes, well, this which Absalom did, he felt would guarantee Joab coming to see him. Well, it certainly would get my attention. Well, it did to Joab. Verse 31. Then Joab arose and came to Absalom unto his house, and said unto him, Wherefore have your servants set my field on fire? And Absalom answered Joab, Behold, I sent unto you, saying, Come hither, that I may send you to the king to say, Wherefore am I come from Geshur? It had been good for me to have been there still. Now therefore let me see the king's face, and if there be any iniquity in me, let him kill me. Continuing, so Joab came to the king and told him. And when he had called for Absalom, he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. Notes. David's kiss was, as in the case of the prodigal son, the sign of reconciliation and of the restoration of Absalom to his place as a son with all its privileges. Chapter 15. And it came to pass after this that Absalom prepared him chariots and horses and 50 men to run before him. Notes. This was the accompaniment of royalty. In other words, Absalom was preparing to go ahead and lead the revolt. Verse 2. And Absalom rose up early and stood beside the way of the gate. And it was so that when any man who had a controversy came to the king for judgment, then Absalom called unto him and said, Of what city are you? And he said, Your servant is of one of the tribes of Israel. Notes: most business dealings and judicial renderings were normally done at the gate of the city, with buildings constructed there for just such a purpose. Verse 3: And Absalom said unto him, See, your matters are good and right, but there is no man deputed of the king to hear you. Notes: in other words, the king may not decide in your favor, but I definitely would if I had the power. Verse 4: Absalom said moreover, Oh, that I were made judge in the land, that every man which has any suit or case might come unto me, and I would do him justice. And it was so that when any man came near to him to do him obeisance, he put forth his hand and took him and kissed him. And on this manner did Absalom to all Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel. Notes: Absalom very easily deceived people by a profession of devotion to them, and as easily deceived his father by a profession of devotion to God. Well, because of man's has fallen from God's moral image, therefore he can readily deceive and be deceived. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 13. He deceived the people of Israel by flattery, which was altogether insincere. All too often, the Absalom spirit still prevails in the modern church. A deceitful heart projects such, and a deceitful mind will accept it. In other words, he's going around, he's pretending to be the mayor, kissing babies and all the other things, and then he's just doing what most politicians do nowadays. They just turn their back. Verse 7. And it came to pass after 40 years that Absalom said unto the king, I pray you, let me go and pay my vow which I have vowed unto the Lord in Hebron. Notes: some have said that this is a copyist mistake and it should have been rendered 4 years. However, others say that this was speaking of David and not Absalom. David was about 16 years old when he was anointed king by Samuel, and that was in 1 Samuel chapter 16. Considering that he was now about 56 years old, this means that it was 40 years since the anointing. Well, bottom line is either one can be true. And as a side note, the Lord was the furthest thing from the mind of Absalom. Just take note of that for the last half of that 7th verse. Verse 8. For your servant vowed a vow while I abode in Geshur in Syria, saying, If the Lord shall bring me again indeed to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said unto him, Go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent spies throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, As soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom reigns in Hebron. Notes: Absalom would now attempt to take the throne away from his father. But God had not called Absalom to the throne, but rather David. And that's the way it's going to stay. Verse 11. And with Absalom went 200 men out of Jerusalem who were called, and they went in their simplicity, and they knew not anything. Notes: in other words, they had no idea about Absalom's plot to take the throne. Completely oblivious to it. Verse 12. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel the Gilonite, David's counselor, from his city, even from Gilo, while he offered sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. Notes: Ahithophel was Bathsheba's grandfather. He was one of the wisest men in Israel, but evidently showed little wisdom here. He should have known that if Absalom had truly been successful in becoming king, that Bathsheba and all of her sons would surely be killed. However, most probably Absalom had guaranteed their safety. Israel was, at that time, the most prosperous nation on the face of the earth, and that prosperity was due to King David. However, Israel evidently didn't see that and would now seek to throw David over. How so? Much like the modern church. It seeks to destroy that which is its salvation and accepts that which is its ruin. The reason is the same now as then. Flesh responds to flesh. And we must pick up in chapter 15, verse 13 of 2 Samuel. Thank you, and God bless.